Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. With this one, my friends, I'm gonna be testing a GeForce RTX 4080 Super in Manor Lords. This one is the Founders Edition model of the card. We are running it with the latest Nvidia drivers, and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power-Up's GPU Z. Resizable bar is also enabled there. And over on the left, we're pairing it with a Ryzen 9 7950X3D with half of its cores disabled, so it's basically the same as a Ryzen 7 7800X3D. This is to make sure that the game utilizes the 3D V cache cores, otherwise some games will not utilize those cores and end up running a little bit slower. Finally, on the memory tab, we're using 32GB of DDR5 6000 MHz RAM in dual channel CL30, and let's get right into it, shall we? Let's go over the settings. So I'm playing at 4K resolution right here with TAA, 100% resolution scale. It's native 4K, using the maximum settings, and this game looks really good at these settings, guys, and it performs absolutely amazingly here with the RTX 4080 Super. There is going to be the odd stutter here and there, you saw it in the frame time graph, but well, that's just because this is an Unreal Engine 4 title, and being a UE4 game and not having a shader compilation feature before you get into it, well, you end up with a little bit of shader compilation stuttering here and there. Now, where you're gonna see the least FPS is by the forest areas like this one. It gets down into the 70s here at native 4K resolution. I have seen it drop down into the 60s previously when it was raining at the same time, but I haven't really seen it drop from 60 FPS with the 4080 Super here at 4K max settings. Still very intensive for what it is, you know. You might think it's a city builder game, so it's pretty easy to run. It will run on a potato, and while that could be true, I tested the GT 1030 already in this game, and it played it with 20 FPS, but it did. And I mean, it's kind of playable still even with 20 FPS, so that's fine. Let's walk around here with our Manor Lord right here. Yes, 100 frames per second, so it's a little bit less intensive when you're doing this compared to just panning around the city from above and stuff like that, seeing all of the things from above. I guess it kind of makes sense because now we're seeing a little bit less stuff on screen overall, right? But well, while this is not a high refresh rate experience, unfortunately, it's still a very good one and a beautiful one to look at the same time. I think the graphics, although some of the things aren't really very high quality, like the fence over here, textures and so on, it still looks beautiful, right? Especially if you see things from above. Like, it has a lot of little details, everybody walking around and working on their stuff and so on. It's nice to look at, and it's pretty chill as well. I've been having a great time playing this game on my free time sometimes. Around here, we're getting like 70s, 80s at times. Not a problem, guys. This is gonna be fantastic at 4K max settings on a 4080 Super, as it should be because it's a very expensive GPU. Now, this is not how I've been playing this game, however, because if you let the GPU usage go up to 100%, it consumes a heck of a lot of power, of course, and honestly, you don't need all of these FPS to play the game and enjoy it properly, right? I feel like 60 FPS locked is probably the way to go, so I'm gonna do it right here. I'm gonna set it to 60 there, and look at that. The frame time is still a little bit jittery, as you can see, but I can't really feel those jitters, honestly. It feels smooth to me. If I lock it with RivaTuner Statistics Server, by the way, which is what I've been using, actually, let me just do that. I'm gonna lock it to 60 right here. You can see that the frame time graph gets better. It's a flat graph right now, so the frame times are more stable, but again, it feels exactly the same locking it inside of the game or in RivaTuner itself, so I don't really care, honestly. And this way, the GPU uses a little bit less power. Instead of like 280 watts, it's usually around 210 to 220 most of the time, even lower than that sometimes higher, of course, with the trees and stuff like that on screen. Very intensive. But yeah, you save a little bit of power there if you want to stay at the native resolution. But I wouldn't, and I haven't been doing that because it gets very hot in my room and uncomfortable because it's almost summer here in Portugal. And 200 plus watts on the GPU, well, that's still a lot. So I'm gonna unlock the FPS. It's now set to 0 right there in RivaTuner Statistics Server, and I'm gonna set it to DLSS quality. And this is DLSS 2, okay, so there's no frame generation and stuff. But look at the FPS, guys. It improves our FPS by a good amount, like 30, 40 frames per second at times. That changes the experience quite drastically, honestly, in terms of the refresh rate and the smoothness. It feels way smoother like this. I finally can use 120 Hz with my capture card. I finally got a HDMI 2.1 capture card. And over here by the tree line, instead of dropping to the 70s, it drops into the low 100s. So it's going to be a much smoother experience if you want to run the FPS unlocked. It's not gonna change the way you play at all. It's just gonna feel a lot better if you pan things around like this. Like, you can see all of those frames, and it's very beautiful and smooth and gorgeous. But again, if you don't lock the FPS, there's the downside of the power. It's using 260 watts, a little bit less than it was using at native resolution. Here with quality DLSS, that's usually what happens. You enable DLSS, people are hungry, I'm sorry. You enable DLSS and it usually consumes a little bit less power. Let's take a look at the width field over here. Sometimes that's intensive. It's a very small width field though. Let's check out the other one. There it is. Yeah, that one is full. So I'm gonna check this out right here. Sometimes this is very intensive, guys. At least it was with the GT 1030 and RTX 3060, but with the 4080 Super, it's pretty much the same as looking at the entire city from above. Anyway, if you don't care about the power bill, sure, play like this. It's still super sharp and beautiful, and you can see a little bit of softness, and you can notice that it's not native resolution if you're running a 42-inch monitor. Today, however, I downgraded to a 32-inch monitor for these videos, because I think most people will probably utilize 32-inch monitors with the 4K resolution, right? And I can say that quality DLSS here at 32 inches looks almost the same as native res. I can see a little bit less aliasing because things are slightly softer right now, but that's actually a good thing. Over here by the mill area, you can see the aliasing still popping up right there, but DLSS mostly smoothens things out, and you can see a little bit of ghosting there as things turn, as you can see right there. Yeah, but it's super minor, guys. It doesn't really matter, and whenever you're seeing things like this, and even doing fast rolls like this, if you want to do that, there's no ghosting. Can't really notice much of a difference. So at 32 inches and lower, I definitely pick quality DLSS. At 42 inches, probably TAA at native resolution. Now, this is a very smooth experience, and it's actually high refresh rate. So if you don't want to trade that for lower power, that's fine, but I'm gonna do that, guys, because I think it's definitely worth saving a lot of power and locking it to 60 FPS. This way, this is how I've been playing the game, okay? You can have 130 to 140 watts of power usage. I mean, maybe to 160 watts. So it's consuming pretty much the same as an RTX 4060 Ti, basically. And that's very, very good. It's very power efficient, this GPU, if you do this. Quality DLSS, maximum settings, 4K, 60 FPS lock. It's still gonna feel smooth, of course, turning things around because it's 60 FPS locked. And this is how I play it, basically, guys. You save a lot of power, you improve the lifespan of your GPU because you're not running it at full power and full temperature as well, high temperature. It's better this way, in my opinion. Of course, if you want to go for a higher refresh rate stuff, feel free to do so. I just think that in this particular title, locking to 60 FPS and saving a bit of power makes a lot of sense. It's almost nighttime. Let's take a look at the fire right here. Pretty interesting. It's just like a white blob. It looks great, honestly. Not bad. Not bad at all. The sun is up there. Wasn't the sun up there when we started? This is interesting. It feels like it's in the same place, but now it's much darker. Anyway, 60 frames per second down here. It's gonna be 60 frames per second all of the time. You get it, right? Let's check it out inside of the tree line. Oh, finally it's raining, by the way. This is the most intensive scenario right here. Trees with the rain on top, and it consumes up to 180 watts still. Kind of the same thing as we saw previously, going over 180 sometimes. Yeah, not a problem. This is how I've been playing this game, basically. And I haven't really been monitoring the stats, of course, but I know the power utilization is way, way lower. Now let's go back to the native resolution right here, and I'm gonna test it out at 1440p because I know that a lot of people are buying these GPUs for 1440p as well. Looks great. Of course it will look very good on a 27-inch monitor, although you can see a lot of noise on the trees, for example, even on a 27-inch monitor with 107 ppi, because I also noticed that on my 42-inch monitor at 4K, and that's exactly the same ppi as a 27-inch 1440p. Yes, let's go. So it seems like it's getting around the same FPS, maybe slightly lower than 4K with quality DLSS was, and native resolution, maybe because it's raining once again. Over by the tree line, it's getting down into the high 90s sometimes. 101, 103 right there. Yep, not a problem still. So if you want to max out the game with your 1440p monitor all of the time and have a high refresh rate experience, you can definitely expect that. Let's take a look at the width field again. 120s, no problem. Even with the rain, everything is nice and smooth. People are definitely not happy right now. People require food. I know, I'm sorry, okay? I'm benchmarking. I will feed them later. Oh boy, if I can, because this is actually quite hard at the moment to find food, guys. I'm just starting the game, you know, I'm like 5 hours in, and this is what I came up with, little town, but I think I will start over again and make better decisions the next time, now that I know how to play a little bit better, right? But anyway, that's not why we're here. You're here to see the performance. Everything is nice and smooth as it should be at 1440p. Still, it may be a little bit underwhelming to see these FPS. You kind of would expect these frames on a UE4 title coming from a 4070 maybe, not a 4080 Super, right? But it's a one-guy job, okay? One developer made this. We gotta excuse him a little bit, okay? And it's still in early access at the same time. If it was a big studio making this, yeah, sure, I'd bash the performance a little bit, although it's very playable, obviously, with a 4080 Super. But yeah, for example, on the 3060 video, I was a little bit mad, but you gotta remember, one guy made this. Now, what if you want to lock your FPS to 60 at 1440p? How much would the 4080 Super draw then? 120s, 130s, watts? It's definitely a little bit less than it was at 4K with quality DLSS, right? Over by the tree line, 170s? Nope, it's going up by quite a lot. What, 183, 185? Okay, so basically it's the same, I believe. I guess it makes sense because at native resolution we got around the same FPS as quality DLSS and 4K, so yeah, it will consume around the same. Very, very efficient for what you're getting right here with 60 FPS. And again, this is how I would utilize it. Now, let's use some DLSS. At 1440p, DLSS quality might look a little bit softer, maybe too soft. However, it does fix the noise that we were seeing on the trees, so at least there's that. I don't know what you choose, it's up to you, of course. You saw the graphics, it was definitely crispier and noisier at the same time at native resolution with TAA. This gives a look of like using anti-aliasing. It kind of still looks very similar to native resolution, you know, at 1440p, but yeah, it's a little bit softer, basically. Still looks great, though, and now we get like 144 plus FPS all of the time, I guess. Maybe not. Sometimes it drops near the trees, but not by much. So you would max out a 144Hz monitor at 1440p most of the time here with 4080 Super in Manor Lords. But now I'm curious, let's lock it to 60 FPS. By the way, I'm doing this now inside of the game instead of in Rivet Tuner because capture card things, it works better this way. If I'm not at native resolution, it does something weird. It lowers the frame rate of the video, and then it's a pain. Anyway, the only difference is at 60 FPS with Rivet Tuner, it would get a flat frame time graph instead of that, but it feels basically the same, so no problems. 60 FPS is what you get. Well, I actually didn't count the FPS previously with the FPS lock like that, but now we can see the 1% lows being affected by the little stutters that are happening every once in a while. But again, it definitely doesn't feel like much stuttering is happening most of the time, at least. So it's fine like this, guys. But now take a look at that awesome power usage, guys. We're in the 80 to 100 watt range. Sometimes it goes up to like 130, 140. So basically, if you're just looking at the city, you can have 40-60 levels of power draw, even 10-60 levels of power draw. Sometimes that GPU goes down to like 80 to 90 watts, especially the 3GB version, I think. Yeah, this is super, super impressive. Guys, basically we're getting 1440p visual fidelity, a little bit softer again because of DLSS, 60 FPS locked, ultra settings, and it's consuming 80 watts. That's, you can't complain with that, right, guys? Look at that, golden field, dude. Beautiful stuff right here. Wow, okay, so now I can see a lot of artifacting, I think, from DLSS. So it works a little bit bad here. There's a lot more pixelation, basically. But this is a niche scenario anyways, and on a smaller monitor, I'm using a 32-inch 4K monitor, of course. On a smaller monitor, 27 inches, 1440p, it would look a little bit better than that. Anyway, I think that's about it for this video. Now, you know what? Let's test 1080p as well. I'm gonna keep it shorter here at this res. But I'm really curious to see like the power draw right now. So around the same at native 1080p resolution as it was with 1440p quality DLSS. Definitely looks a little bit rougher right now in the edges. But, you know, on a native 1080p monitor it would look okay. Let's check it out now with DLSS quality. This is with 60 FPS lock, okay, and it gets down into the 70 watt range. This is like 1050 Ti power draw, guys, at 1080p Ultra with DLSS quality. Pretty interesting. Let's unlimit the FPS, guys, and see. DLSS quality 1080p gets you 200-ish frames per second. It's pretty interesting that the CPU is still not becoming the bottleneck here at 200 frames. Maybe with a bigger city it would, you know. But yeah, nice to see that it's capable of 200 plus. Again, a guy made this. I thought maybe the CPU performance would be crap, but no. It seems like it's all right. Okay, even with DLSS quality and ultra settings, 1080p with a 4080 Super CPU is not a bottleneck. We don't see that very often in other titles, you know. Let's use TAA now, 100% right there. Did I disable it previously? Maybe I disabled it. I think at 1440p native resolution I disabled TAA. That's why it looked so noisy, because right now it's a little bit less noisy than it was with that. But TAA doesn't really affect the performance by much. If you want TAA, feel free to enable it at 1440p. It will look a little bit better than the DLSS again, just slightly softer than native resolution. And over here at 1080p, with unlocked FPS, of course, we are getting 250 watts plus on the GPU, 150, 130 plus all of the time, even in the tree line or forest area. Not bad. But, I mean, it's 1080p. What's the point? You should upgrade your monitor to 1440p if you're running a 4080 Super and a 1080p monitor. Alright, that's been it for this one, guys. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you guys found this interesting to look at. And I'll catch you in the next one very soon. Love you all. Bye-bye.